Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad you were able to join us today for our really great session that we're going to have this afternoon entitled Growing Through Crisis, Canada's Cellular Agricultural Opportunity. My name is John Kelly. I'm Deputy Minister with the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, and have a lot of experience in the innovation space, particularly within the ag and food space. And so I'm really happy to be able to share some of the knowledge that's coming from our speakers today. Traditionally, we've gotten sources of protein from various sources from agriculture, but we're looking at times now where we have growing populations, we have different wants and needs from the consumer, we have resource limitations in a lot of areas, and we have food insecurity, which is driving a lot of economies in the wrong direction. We also have challenges and costs of production and distribution of different protein sources. But we are seeing an increase in the demand for alternative sources of protein. So these alternative sources of protein could include things like plant-based proteins. You know, we've seen a significant growth in the soy market, and in particular into the pea market. We've also seen interest in other markets, including insect-based proteins, which, you know, in North America have not really had a lot of play, but they are getting more play. And then we are moving into another area, which is cellular agriculture. And cellular agriculture is a brand new novel opportunity for us. So we have a great opportunity to listen to some great speakers here today. I want to make sure that you pay particularly attention to what everyone has to say, and when you have questions that you want to ask, think about these questions and we'll try to get to them. Our first speaker is Bettina Hamelin, and she is President and CEO of Ontario Genomics. Ontario Genomics is an Ontario-based not-for-profit, and it's really designed to catalyze the use of genomics-based technology across multiple sectors, including the agriculture and food side. She has tremendous experience in academia, industry, and in the not-for-profits, having worked for, you know, pharma companies, worked as a professor at the University of Laval, served as VP for NSERC's Research Partnerships Directorate, as well as other things. She volunteers. She's got a broad research and innovation community linkage, and she serves on boards of many different areas, including as well serving as a mentor at Creative Destruction Labs. So that's great for our new up-and-coming scientists, which is just fantastic. And I'm going to introduce Bettina in just a moment more fully, and she's going to give us some background on why we're here. Secondly, we have Giuliano Toloso, who is Deputy Director of the Innovation and Growth Policy Division of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. And, you know, Giuliano has got a lot of experience in this area as well, 20 years plus. But over the past 10 years, he's been involved with CSPC. He's organized and moderated 2 sessions. He's had one on communicating with Canadians about agriculture biotechnology, which you can imagine received a lot of kudos, and then another one on patenting higher life forms. We also have Allison Sundstrom, who is a venture partner from Builders VC in San Francisco. It's a San Francisco, California-based venture capital fund. And there's all sorts of different things that she's been involved with, but in particular, she's been an investment committee of the 51. The 51 is creating a critical mass of female-powered capital investing in women-led companies, and you got to give a lot of credit for people who are taking very strong leadership positions. She's a founding partner and fellow of AgStream also at CDL, Creative Destruction Labs, and she's got tremendous backgrounds with, an example would be a company called Grow Safe Systems, which they grew out of a garage, essentially, to become a global operations organization. Sort of reminds me of Hewlett Packard if you will, because that's exactly how they started, right? And she holds patents in innovative technologies and other ventures. And then our fourth speaker is Lavanya Anandan, and she is the director of innovation field cultured meat with Merck out of Germany, right? And she's based in the company's innovation hub in the San Francisco Bay Area, and she and her team are building new businesses dedicated to developing enabling technologies to accelerate cultured meat production at scale. And this is one of the key challenges that we have with these technologies. So she holds a PhD from the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. You're also going to see in your information that you see here is we are going to have some polls that do come up. And these polls, they ask questions for you to participate, and I encourage you to come forward. There's also a Q&A section for if you want to ask questions. There's a chat section if you want to engage, interact, and we hope that you will ask questions, and that's really what we're looking for you to do here. So with that as a start, what I'd like to do now, the first poll question should be coming up, and the question is, what is your organization and sector? And really it's to give us some idea of who the audience is, right? And to try and get a good sense there. So what I'd like to do now is move this session over to Bettina Hamlin. Dr. Hamlin, again, is President and CEO of Ontario Genomics, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about a white paper and policy recommendations that Ontario Genomics has done in consultation with many in the sector. So with that, Bettina, I'll move it over to you.
Thank you very much, John. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion. Thanks for the great introduction, John, and setting the stage so beautifully. I'm joining you today from Vancouver, and I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I'm currently situated is the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I, in particular, want to thank John, Giuliano, Allison, and Lavanya for joining us today, and CSPC for putting on this tremendous conference and for inviting us to participate here again. This is our fourth participation in a row. And finally, I want to thank my team, in particular, Drs. Elaine Corbett and Laura Riley, who have put countless hours into doing the research and writing the report we're releasing today, and together with Paulina Martins and her team created a beautiful report you'll find on our website. And they also made today's panel possible, and they had also lots of help from other people at OG. So thank you to everyone. Now, you may wonder what exactly is cellular agriculture, and John already gave some great examples. And, cellular agriculture is really a term that encompasses a whole set of technologies and approaches to manufacture food products that are typically produced from plants or livestock. Here on the slide, you see the two main ways to make foods or ingredients, and there are others, but these are the main ones dominating this new industry right now. And so on the left side, what you see is that we can derive products through fermentation. And the starting point here is a microorganism, for example, a bacterium or a yeast. And we transform that microorganism to make the product we are looking for. And you see some examples here, and I point out that rennet protein is sort of the set of enzyme that's being used to make cheese. And we've been fermenting and producing rennet through fermentation since the 90s, and today 90% of the rennet we use for cheese making is actually made with this technology. So it's not new, but we have so many more ways to use this approach to make products we need. On the right-hand side, you see cultured meats. And that's where we take a small biopsy from a desirable livestock, cattle, pig, chicken, fish. And we take out a few cells. They may be muscle cells, they may be fat cells, they may be connective tissue. And we grow these cells in the lab and we put them in big vats and we grow them in there. It's similar to brewery equipment, and we can then harvest meat. And you see some examples of what's possible to do here. And if you were in a restaurant in Singapore, you could actually order and eat chicken nuggets that are made with cellular agriculture. I want to emphasize that the final product here is biologically equivalent or near equivalent to the conventional plant or animal product. And we can also use hybrid approaches, and the Impossible Burger is a great example here, where we basically make it from plants from plant-derived pea protein, and then we add in there a cellular agriculture-derived heme protein, which is added for the meat flavor. So cellular agriculture really provides an opportunity to make foods. It's really a toolkit to make foods we want and need with much lower carbon footprint, sustainable, and we can really now explore our culinary creativity and create products that we desire, that could be healthier, that could be more tasty, that could be more nutritious, that could be less allergenic. And the opportunities are really near endless, and they go much beyond foods to materials such as silk and leather that we can make using this toolkit of cellular agriculture. And this is really where it all started for us at Ontario Genomics several years ago, with the recognition that technologies and disciplines and even sectors are converging, and that we can now apply engineering principles and robotics and nanotechnologies and AI to making products we want and need using nature's most sophisticated manufacturing system, biology itself, and really cells in particular. And so we set out a number of years ago to bring together that very diverse community through annual conferences, workshops. We created a national steering committee to coalesce really the opportunity into a first white paper on engineering and biology, and the opportunity for Canada that was released last year. And in this paper, we identified 3 application areas where Canada could lead with the right approach and the right incentivization. And one of those areas was food security. And today, we're really thrilled to launch the follow-on publication, quite fulsome report on cellular agriculture and the opportunity it constitutes for Canada. And in that report, we are describing an industry that's growing exponentially, that's seen over $9 billion of investment globally, and that has already produced some great successes. For example, Perfect Days cowless dairy product lines, where whey protein is produced, and it now is mixed into ice cream and into cream cheese and yogurt, and other products are down the line. We talked about the Impossible Burger and the chicken nuggets that are already available elsewhere. And so the analysis really here illustrates that the Canadian cellular agriculture landscape is rapidly evolving. It shows tremendous promise to develop alongside and augment Canada's conventional agriculture and food industries. And our Canadian startup companies are sprouting up, and they're already taking advantage of the growing opportunities along the supply chain. Dr. Mike from Massau, from the University of Guelph, provided an economic analysis with some optimistic scenarios that suggest an up to $7.5 billion a year industry and more than 80,000 jobs created by 2030. That's really around the corner. And longer term, Canadian revenue is as high as $12.5 billion per year, with the creation of more than 140,000 jobs. So there's a real economic opportunity here that is achievable and aligned with our current share of global market. And the question is less Is that the size we're going to achieve, size of the market we can achieve? The question is more, how long does it take to get there? Because it does take investment in science and technology and infrastructure and training and so on and so forth. And Mike is participating today. So if there are in-depth questions about his analysis, Mike is there to answer them. So on the backbone of an in-depth review of what's happening around the world and with some funding from AAFC, we partnered with Dr. Lenore Newman's team at the University of Fraser Valley to engage more than 60 Canadian and international stakeholders to really better understand the opportunity for Canada and the challenges we need to overcome. And so here is how we summarized some real actionable opportunities for us to really get into that market. And the first one, very anonymous amongst all the stakeholders we talked to, is we need to develop a national vision and a strategy for a Canadian cellular agriculture industry. And we need to do that in the near term because the industry is growing exponentially elsewhere, and we're already importing and consuming products like the Impossible Burger here. Second, we need to establish a clear and transparent regulatory framework. And that framework needs to be agile, iterative, innovative, and really built on and aligned with our rigorous regulatory processes and our high food safety standards. And finally, we need to provide supporting mechanisms for research and commercial development. A lot of these technologies are still early in the development, and we need incentivization through public and private investment and partnerships with the appropriate infrastructure, opportunities for training, upskilling, reskilling, company creation, scale up, and growth, so that we can make products in Canada and commercialize them here and export them to the world. So I know that there is a lot to unpack here, and I really look forward to doing that over the next hour or so, and look forward to your comments and questions. So let me conclude by reminding all of us that we live in really precarious times, not only because we're living through a lingering pandemic, but because the impacts of climate change are really getting under our skin. I'm here in British Columbia. Thousands of fires across the province this past summer have burned down entire towns, have taken lives and livelihoods away, followed by devastating floods we are dealing with right now in BC interior that has killed already thousands of animals and also people. COP26 told us that 1.5 degrees Celsius may still be within reach, but it's a precarious goal, and we have to do everything we can and work together to get there, because scientists are telling us it's really looking more like 2.4 degrees warming, and the disasters we're seeing right now are happening at about 1.1 degree Celsius. So nature, the way we use our land, and climate change are unbreakably linked. I'm convinced that we will innovate across the entire food system, and engineering solutions, big data, genomics will continue to provide great advances. But what we're suggesting here is that cellular agriculture is a new toolkit to make foods we want and need, and we have an opportunity with that to contribute to food production in ways that do not take away, but rather add to our current strong domestic and export markets, and could help us feed the growing world and do so sustainably. And with that, thank you very much. I hand it back over to John.
Thanks, Bettina. Great introduction to the topic. I note in the poll that we have mostly government and not-for-profit with a few academics in there. So interestingly, we have no industry folks here. So I think we can target our discussion that way as we move forward. So Allison, I'm going to pass this over to you, and maybe you can introduce yourself and your work in relation to what you do with cellular agriculture. So over to you.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the introduction. Bettina, I think that you should be congratulated for your leadership in this area. And I'm really sad to hear that we don't have industry members sitting in the audience, because this is a huge opportunity for Canada. As John said, I've spent most of my life as an entrepreneur and 20 years in the livestock industry. So it's rather odd, perhaps, that you find me sitting in a cellular agriculture presentation. As John indicated, I am a venture partner and LP at Builders VC. We're a San Francisco-based venture capital fund, also based in Calgary. And what we are doing is we're investing in founders that are reimagining large, underinvested, antiquated industries. I'm also very proud to be an advisor to the 51. The 51 is creating a critical mass of female-powered capital investing in diverse founders, not just female-led teams, but minority teams, those that are underappreciated perhaps by the investment community. I'm also involved in a few accelerators. I'm a founding partner of the Ag Stream of the Creative Destruction Lab in Calgary and the Supply Chain Stream in Montreal. CDL delivers an objective-based mentorship program for massively scalable seed stage science technology-based companies. What I've been really impressed by is there's been several cellular agriculture companies applying to both CDL and to the 51. I think that we now have something like 14 cellular ag companies in Canada at startup stage looking for mentorship. I'm also involved in Innovation Masterminds, a pre-accelerator designed to overcome the earliest barriers researchers face commercializing innovation. And I think we have so many potential investments sitting within our universities that should be commercialized. Builders VC has made investments very early in the cellular agricultural space. We were one of the first investors in Memphis Meats, which is now Upside Foods, which is developing cellular alternative meat products, and as well Bolt Threads. And Bolt Threads, Bettina mentioned alternative materials, and this is what Bolt Threads is doing. And if you happen to follow the fashion scene, Bolt Thread material, a leather alternative, was on Stella McCartney's runway this past season. I think that cellular agriculture offers an opportunity for Canada that goes beyond just perhaps early stage science and technology. I think that we can build a wealth of opportunity for Canada. And we have the potential to be an agricultural superpower, but we also have the potential to take new avenues. And the foundation, I think, of smart economic renewal would be built through Canadian companies commercializing new ideas to scale globally. And I think we can talk about the investment potential more so as we go through the rest of the morning. So thank you, John, and thank you, Bettina, for the excellent introduction.
Allison, thank you for that. I know that there is a tremendous opportunity for our startups here, and we'll get into some of that discussion in a few minutes. I'd like to next introduce Lavanya Anandan from Merck, and this is really where it's hitting the road, right? So they are looking at developing full-on products. And it's a great opportunity to showcase how it can be created. So Lavanya, over to you.
Thanks, John, and also thank you to Bettina as well as Elaine for inviting me on this panel. I've been interacting with the team for the past maybe year or so now, and it's really been for me a lot of learning about Canada's initiatives in this area, and I think there's massive opportunity. So just as a brief introduction, I'm a senior director at Merck KGaA, which is a global science and technology company that is focused on life sciences, biopharma, and electronics. So really kind of diverse industry sectors we participate in. So I am bringing the industry perspective today, and really think it takes a village across academia, venture capital, private, public industry to make this happen. So really nice to be sharing the stage with a diverse set of team members. So for the past about 3 years, I've been leading a new business venture for the company focused on cultured meat. And I have to say that it's been one of the most fulfilling experiences for me. As a molecular biologist with a PhD in biology, being able to bring that together, that science and technology expertise, together with addressing a very important sustainability challenge that our world is facing has been, a very fulfilling experience for me. So just a little bit of background on why are we interested in this space. So we are, from the life science perspective, a leading supplier to the biopharma industry, where we've helped many startup and pharma companies really scale up their production when it comes to biologics and cell therapy products over the past 30 years. And if you look at the scientific workflow of cultured meat, it's quite similar to biopharma, but of course there are major differences we will get into. But really where we're coming at it is that a lot of the startups that are working towards making commercialization a reality are still hitting a lot of basic challenges when it comes to really scaling up the production process as well as reducing costs. So we're kind of bringing the perspective of biopharma and having really helped the industry scale and overcome many challenges, really acting as a partner, kind of a backbone supplier partner to this kind of evolving industry. And it's really with many of the startups in the field, and really looking forward to this truly scaling up and bringing food to our plates, as well as addressing a very important sustainability need in the future.
So thank you, Lavanya. And I think where I'm going to go first is to talk somewhat about what the opportunity is here. And it really is, not only from an interesting science perspective, but I think there's probably a significant business opportunity here. So Allison, when we talk about cellular agriculture, do you see this as an important opportunity for Canada, and in particular as an investable type opportunity?
So if you're a venture capitalist, you are interested in investments that not only have social impact, I think, but you're also you're interested in things that make money. And this is an area that is one of those areas. There's a famous venture capitalist said that venture capital is not just a home run business, it's a grand slam business. And we according to a recent McKinsey report, over the next 30 years, more than 60% of our physical inputs will be produced through alternative processes arising from a biorevolution and new and alternative processes. I would really like to see Canada ride this wave. And here's why. Animal-based products are used in a variety of industries, from food to textile to cosmetics to pharmaceuticals, as Lavanya said. The animal products market is about a $2 trillion annual market, and it's growing. It's growing at a rate beyond most sectors of our economy. Human food accounts for about 85% of this market, but pet food and textile have significant market sizes. These are great beachhead markets for Canadian cellular startups. Now, looking at one specific example, and in addition to being an investor in Builders VC, I'm also an investor in Ag Funder. And Ag Funder has made some of the really smart early investments in this space, one being an Edmonton-based company called Future Fields that's really building the scaffolding around around cellular agriculture. But to give you a specific example, in 2019, Beyond Meat had a monumental IPO debut. They surged 163% on their first day of trading. And if you looked, and based on their secondary offering market cap of about 9.7 billion, if you were a VC firm that had invested in Beyond Meat's Series A in 2011, when the company was valued at only 4.8 million, you would have realized a 400 times return on your investment if you sold your shares today. And I would say from a venture capital perspective and any perspective, opportunities don't get much bigger than this.
That's really awesome. And anytime I can find an opportunity that's got a 400% return, my ears perk up, right? So there's lots of interest there. So I'm looking at our poll. The second one is, how familiar are you with cellular ag? And about 2/3 are somewhat or familiar with cellular ag, but there's about a third that's not, right? So I think this is a really good opportunity to highlight these opportunities, and they are different, right? And so I think we need to be thinking about it's a different mindset for these types of things. And I think Allison, you really have opened that up. Lavanya, I'd like to hear it from an international stage, sort of the same question. Why would Merck get engaged with cellular agriculture? Because it's not really been something that they've been involved with in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And since you mentioned, John, that the audience may not be too familiar with cell ag, maybe I'd talk also a little bit about exactly the process when it comes to cultured meat, for example. And really this involves taking first an animal biopsy, as Bettina mentioned, from either a terrestrial animal or a seafood, and then isolating the stem cells from this. The stem cells are then nurtured in a nutrient-rich medium, usually called cell culture media. After which you actually put it into a bioreactor in order to scale up, and then also utilize things like scaffolding that Allison was mentioning from Future Fields, that are really creating kind of the platform for differentiation and creating structured meat products. So you ask, what is the opportunity? Why would a company like us be interested in this? And I had mentioned how the basic scientific workflow is quite similar, right, to biologics and cell therapy, but here we are ingesting the final product. So the parameters are quite different when it comes to scale and cost. But let's look at the numbers, right? I think, Allison, you had mentioned one of the numbers from McKinsey, and there's this other report from A.T. Kearney that I think has a much more kind of ambitious outlook at this, but they had predicted something like about 10% of the global meat market, which is somewhere between 1 and 2 trillion. So 10% of the global meat market we could take for cellular agriculture, more specifically even cultured meat by 2030. And then up to 35% by 2040. So this is really, really quite an ambitious number. But even if you think about just 1%, even 1% would be quite a massive number when you're looking at 1 trillion, right? And then from our perspective as just a supplier, even if you take one of the verticals, which is cell culture media, assuming it takes 10 liters to grow 1 kg of meat, if you were going to take 1% of the global meat market, that means you will need 30 billion liters of cell culture media per year. So that is an exciting, reason for us to look into this space and help with innovative technologies and solutions. And then I think, of course, beyond the business objectives, it's also a topic that's close to our heart from the sustainability angle as well. So I think for me, why it's so exciting is this really amazing kind of intersection of business and sustainability together.
So I think one of the things you've highlighted is by 2030, the rapid expansion of the desire for high quality proteins. And we are seeing that around the globe. And we're seeing it in countries like India, for example, where the middle class is rapidly expanding. They have more disposable income. They'll be looking for higher quality products. That's a tremendous market for us, and we can look at trying to develop those for Canadian manufacturers. Bettina, you mentioned these biological manufacturing systems, which I thought was kind of an interesting way of describing it. And so how do you see Canada's position here in the development of these manufacturing systems? We are already a significant exporter. We're in the top 5 exporters of food globally. So how do you see this positioning us, and why is it important now?
Yeah, thanks. And I think the opportunity we have is really building on our position of strength. As you said, we're the 5th largest exporter. We have trade agreements. We have world-class expertise across the required disciplines to make this happen. We have available feedstock. So, one of the things when we talk about process of growing cells, sometimes we feed cells with sugar, but we can feed cells also with waste of different types, and we have plenty of waste. So we have all those opportunities, and that's really our position of strength. And another sort of data point of where Canadians have recognized this opportunity is that we actually have, we've Allison investing and supporting through CDL CELAC companies, but also the Canadian Pension Fund Investment Board has led, significant fundraising rounds for companies like Perfect Day. The Ontario Teachers Pension Fund has invested in CELAC companies. So there is definitely the recognition that this is a great opportunity. So why is this important for us now? I feel that there is, a window of opportunity. We see that the technology is evolving. There's still a lot of technical hurdles we need to overcome that Lavanya spoke to in terms of scaling up, in terms of purification and things like that. But there's a window of opportunity now to, coordinate our efforts and really build on our strength and leverage this new way of making foods to complement what we already do well, but in a very sustainable way.
Yeah, I have to reflect on your comment about inputs. A good friend of mine, Dr. Gord Surgener, would talk about waste, and he says you should never ever talk about waste. All a waste product is an input looking for a place to be used, right? And so I think this is a great opportunity to use those diverse inputs, if you will. We do have a question from the audience, and I'm going to read it out here. It says, I'm working with academic groups, including some ready to or already exploring commercialization in cell ag. The groups, either student and startup, are missing mentorship on moving R&D from the lab bench to edible products. How stringent are the government frameworks around this? Okay, I'm not sure this audience be able to, or this group be able to answer that. Maybe Bettina, you can. And then the second part of it is, where should we be looking for appropriate mentorship on this front? So maybe Bettina, I'll ask you to take the first question, then Allison, because of your work with CDL, maybe we'll go there. Is that okay, Bettina?
Absolutely. So I think this is a great question, and I would say that there is, organization like ours that can help with that mentorship of, and we're doing that with startup companies coming to us, and we help them think through the process and what's required. So I think these opportunities are there. In terms of, then how do you take that then to scale up? This is where we have some gaps that we need to fill in Canada, but we're filling those slowly. And there's opportunities to work, for example, with the Fanchuran Center in Nova Scotia to help with scale up of the processes. And, I would say that the CDL is a great forum to get mentorship that's personalized to your company and that exposes you to the venture world as well. And maybe I hand it over to you, Allison, to comment a little bit more on CDL.
Sure, that's actually a really great comment, and I'm just delighted that Lavanya has joined the conversation today, because she described cell ag so briefly, so wonderfully. And that's probably the starting point, understanding what cell ag is. And when you're building a cellular agriculture company, you have all the same challenges that every other company commercializing deep science and tech in Canada has. Access to capital is a challenge, access to talent, and access to testing infrastructure. And Bettina mentioned a few places. I think it's incumbent on our government, if we are going to take advantage of this, to set up regional areas and regional strengths, perhaps, that can assist entrepreneurs in getting to at least from test bench to initial scale. And that's probably the greatest challenge. In terms of traditional mentorship, I think that going to a program like CDL, which has a very strong set of mentors in this space, including Yves Potvin, for example, that has developed plant-based products. That's the same kind of commercialization expertise that's required. I really think that if we are going to be a significant player in Canada, we're going to have to look at these conversations about test infrastructure, pilot facilities, and really compete to win. We can't do this half-hearted. If we want to be in this space, if we want to be a meaningful player, we have to invest in this space.
So Lavanya, what would you add to that? I mean, I think being able to tell the story is crucial on what you're doing, and you did that beautifully.
Yeah, from the mentorship perspective, I would like to give a shout out to the two nonprofits that are extremely active in the space. One is the Good Food Institute, and the other one is the New Harvest. And both have been looking at the cellular agriculture field for probably the longest, I would say, even starting in 2014. And so these two groups have done a really, really nice job at bringing the ecosystem together. So if you are a new entrepreneur that is just getting into the space and wondering who I should hire, who can I get advice from when it comes to designing my bioprocess, who are the partners in academia and industry I should go to and speak with, these are the groups to connect with. In fact, they also update, I think, on a monthly basis, kind of the entire ecosystem, and you can actually sign on to their platform to become part of these communities, including collaborative seminars that are held on a monthly basis that bring kind of the global community together. So I would, definitely give a shout out there. When it comes to regulatory, also these two groups have been spearheading and putting together safety dossiers. So essentially walking across the entire process, either in fermentation or cultured meat, and looking into, what kind of inputs, what kind of safety assessment, what kind of end product analysis needs to be done for this to be a truly safe product that will come out in the market. So I think those two groups are extremely great resources for especially fledgling companies to get in touch with.
So there are organizations right across the country that do wonderful work with entrepreneurs and new things. Organizations like, in Quebec, you've got Zonag Tech, across Canada, Bioenterprise or Natural Products Canada, specific areas like Platform Calgary or CDL in Calgary. Mars certainly has that mentorship capacity. Here in Ontario, Life Sciences Ontario, one of the things they offer is a mentorship program for these things, BioAtlantic in the Maritimes. So I think if you look across the country, you will find that there are organizations there that for sure can help bring entrepreneurs forward. So Lavanya, I want to go back to you again. So what do we need to do here in Canada to get on the radar of multinationals who might be interested in this? Like, we know that Cargill and Tyson and some of the major players in the US, they're there. So how do we get them interested in what we're doing here?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to put some, perspective in terms of how other nations have been tackling this topic. I think the ones in the lead currently are countries like Singapore and Israel, who are also quite interested in creating their own domestic supply chain, as currently a lot of the food is coming from importing, right? But there were some really nice landmark events that took place last year, specifically in the cultured meat and seafood area. One was Singapore approving the first, commercial sale of cultured meat. Along with that, they also have now put together a safety dossier for the nation. And they've also green-lighted recently a new contract manufacturing organization that can manufacture cultured meat. They've also subsidized infrastructure bills for startup companies, right? So they're doing quite a lot. And I think these are some of the indications that a nation is interested and also looking to invest heavily. And that's something that Allison mentioned too, right? One is to really speak about it, and another is to really make an investment. And I was thinking about what is maybe one area that Canada could focus on to show leadership. And Allison, you mentioned the infrastructure need, right? Having pilot facilities in place. And I think this is actually an area that Canada can take a leadership position, especially because of the great success the nation has had with renewable energy. And I specifically say this because there was a recent study that came out looking at techno-economic analyses and life cycle analyses of cellular agriculture. And it was determined that sustainable energy is going to be the key to unlocking really the environmental benefits of this entire field, and that even facilities have to be fully powered by sustainable energy if this is going to really, offset some of the detrimental effects of conventional meat production. So I think there's a whole list of things that Canada could be doing, but if I could maybe specifically pick on one, that would be for Canada to show the world how you can create a state-of-the-art pilot facility that is entirely powered by renewable energy, specifically designed for cellular agriculture.
So there's challenge number one issued by Lavanya. That's good. I see that Giuliano has joined us. I think he might be having some technical issues. Giuliano, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine, John. Thanks. Yeah, I apologize. Had some technical issues that prevent me from joining.
No issues. So I will come to you in just a second, Giuliano, but I will go to our
Sure.
next poll question. And the question was, will you try cellular ag products? And there about 1 in 12 say no, I would not try any. 1 in 12 say they're unsure because I want a little bit more information. So that's 1 in 6 are saying, I don't know. And then the rest are yes, and other types of products too that can be made without animals. So there is some question about the source of the cells, Bettina, that you described. And then cultivated meat, seafood, steak, ground beef, foie gras. There's not a lot of interest in that area. There was really 0% on that, but other types of products and yes to all above 80%. So that's pretty good. Giuliano, I know you haven't had the benefit of hearing all of the discussion here, but we did discuss prior to this. And what I'd like to get from you is some idea of what you see as some of the regulatory challenges, or I won't call them barriers, but just challenges to bringing these products or developing these products here. Maybe you can address that.
Yeah, sure. I can elaborate that. Just to review, I sort of look after a small policy team at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and we're focused on innovative ag technologies. And our group's been together, at least I've been in the group for the better part of, the genesis was to deal with challenges around the introduction of genetically modified crops and animals. And, since that technology has become more mainstream, we've moved on to the socioeconomic aspects of other innovative ag technologies, including cellular ag, vertical farming, precision agriculture. So our focus is sort of on the consumer acceptance, market acceptance, and sort of return on investment questions around the introduction of these new technologies, as well as other considerations like the regulatory ones. So I'll answer that. So the white paper, and I like to give kudos to Ontario Genomics for their hard work on the production of this white paper, does devote a fair amount of space to the regulatory environment, and it's no surprise that they're calling for a predictable and generally fast-moving regulatory environment for these products, and everyone sort of is looking for that level of regulatory certainty. That's what's needed as far as moving these products forward. And I just look at the example that we've been recently around more precision around products that are developed using gene editing in the crop space. So the regulators and industry and other stakeholders have been working on clarifying the guidance around how these products are going to be treated as novel foods in the environment for the last 4 years. Now, it does take some time, but the regulators are moving in the right direction. So I see a similar pattern happening with cellular ag products. I mean, the framework for novel food regulations is pretty robust. It's sort of a unique system in Canada since we regulate on the products rather than the process. So if a product is determined novel because of the technology that's used, it's usually captured within regulation. Now, I think this experience with developing new guidance and clarified guidance for products of gene editing will serve the regulators very well as they turn their attention to guidance for cellular ag products. And as a department, AFC, we've already sort of started the facilitation of discussion between the regulators and industry. We work closely with Cellular Ag Canada to hold some sessions with the regulators where they can explore the fundamental concepts that are involved in the novelty regulation process, the novelty-based process, and what things developers of these new cellular ag products need to be aware of. And we've also facilitated conversations between the regulators and regulators in Singapore, since they were the first jurisdiction to approve these products. There were some learnings that those folks could impart to our regulators as they move forward with the development of this guidance. Now, that being said, the question of how these products are going to be labeled is a little thornier. The Singapore regulators told us, for example, that these were developed by the industry in that country because consumers are very familiar with concepts like mock chicken, but in Canada, our consumers aren't as familiar with those types of characterizations. Plus, there is a specific definition for meat that you can't really call a product meat unless it comes from the carcass of a dead animal. So the labeling side could face challenges, but the USDA, for example, is consulting. They have an open consultation that I believe is supposed to end in December on how these products should be labeled. So hopefully when we see the results and the feedback from that consultation, that should provide some learnings to our regulators at the Food Inspection Agency.
Thanks for that, Giuliano. So back to what Lavanya had said, Singapore has clearly said this is food. And one of the things I took from what you said, Lavanya, was the preparation of a safety dossier and really to give confidence in the consumer, confidence in the safety of the product, right? So I think that's a real plus. Allison, so you've heard all this. and we've got like a regulatory path, which is reasonably well defined with the novel food regs. What do you see that we're up against from an investment perspective? What's Canada up against?
Well, Canada's up against the fact that we don't have the same level of venture capital as other parts of the world. But as Bettina had mentioned, we're seeing pension funds starting to invest, and we're seeing groups that are very, very interested in this space. I think beyond regulatory, we have a number of barriers, and that is, I think the most critical is the access to skilled personnel in a biological space and elsewhere. And that's not happening. Developing scientists in this space is not happening fast enough. Now, we do see testing capacity being built at the 1,000-liter size, but we need more. So I think we're going to have to overcome those two issues within Canada. I think we also have to overcome another issue, is that we are not accustomed to building companies to scale. And the mentorship to scale companies, especially with such a tough pathway, is something that we're not overly familiar with, but we're starting to build. So those are three areas that I think are incredibly complex. And one of the things that Singapore did is Singapore, and largely perhaps due to a food insecurity, Singapore faces food insecurity. They don't have enough land. We have it. Now, Bettina said something really interesting about us being the 5th largest exporter of foods, or agricultural products. Netherlands, a country the size of Banff, is the 2nd largest exporter of agribusiness products. And Canada is 8th, but in terms of commodities, we rank 5th. I think it takes a will to build the framework to actually invest in this space. So beyond what Lavanya said, I think we have to have that will to invest in this space.
So in those terms, Bettina talked about, the really optimistic view that Dr. Van Massow put forward of 80,000 jobs, and I think it was 7.5 billion up to upwards of 12 billion annually. Is that enough to attract venture capital, or do we need to tell more of a story?
I think we have to create this desire to compete to win. And we in Canada, we compete, but we really need to compete to win. And that takes a different kind of vision, I think. So I think it's a possibility, but we really have to understand the strength. And we have to make sure we don't turn this into a zero-sum game. Livestock has a place, but also new proteins have a space. And so I want to make sure that we don't focus on the alternative side of this becoming a niche. The demand for protein is going to be such over the next 30 years that we need to look at every area of protein. And Canada has the resources. And John, back to your point, we have the waste. So there's a lot of space to build in new areas and build new markets.
Bettina also said something else, and Bettina, I'm going to come to you because I know you're wanting to jump right in. but you said one other thing about the Impossible Burger. And, the Impossible Burger has pea protein in it, and it has cellular protein in it. So it's a combination of technologies. So we don't, to Allison, to your point, we don't need to work with these technologies in isolation. They're stronger together. And I think that's probably the path we should go. Bettina, back to you.
Yeah, and the Impossible Burger, I think this is such a great example. If we're thinking about what could we do here in Canada, is like we are actually producing the pea protein in Western Canada. And we have at least a couple of startup companies in Canada that are solving the heme issue right now. We could make our own improved Impossible Burger versus, buying it from the outside. I think there's also market shifts that will be happening. As an example, we eat around the world, we eat 1 trillion eggs every year. And Australia just came out with their strategy for synthetic or for engineering biology. They have engineering biology, $27 billion opportunity for Australia. And one of the things they're thinking about is like, well, maybe we can make all of the egg white that's required for the world. Because when you build up the scale up and the fermentation, you could actually produce these kinds of shifts. So I think, anchoring some of these opportunities here, and I like Lavanya's idea of, can we build this green, energy powered pilot facility? I think that could be a very interesting starting point. I'm also really interested in the polls that's coming back. It's actually quite interesting how many people in the audience are open to tasting the Cell Ag products. So I think maybe it's just the kinds of people who are attracted to this panel, but it's kind of interesting to see that there is really this openness in actually consuming these products. So yeah, I think we need to invest, and that's what we're proposing in the paper. Is it requires substantial and sustained investments, and we need to have this national vision that we really build this together so that it makes sense for Canada, because it builds on Canada. And one of the things we should be looking at is how have other jurisdictions tackled this? How have they developed their strategy? We heard about Singapore, but we can also look at the UK or the US, how they've built this strategy. And for example, the US, Biden set out here the 5 science and technologies priorities, and one of them is engineering biology. And he has mandated Eric Lander, who is one of the pioneers of the Human Genome Project, to actually lead that strategy. So it's intentional. It's a collaboration between government and academia and industry. And the UK has, through their Synthetic Biology Leadership Council, done it in a very similar way. This collaboration, this intentional approach of developing a strategy for a country that lays out a roadmap of what we need to do today to benefit from this industry tomorrow. And we have people who are interested in tasting the product. So I think the consumer perspective, we haven't talked a lot about it, and maybe I stop here, but I think we might want to come back to the consumer perspective on that as well.
Yeah, we definitely.
Just one point that both Bettina and Allison mentioned is the supply chain, right? So we're talking about infrastructure and all of this, but I think Canada has a huge opportunity to be a leader in supply chain. Just as an example of pea protein being part of the plant-based, it is also a raw material for fermentation-based products and for cellular agriculture-based products, meat and seafood. And there was a recent assessment done by the Good Food Institute, and currently, all the pea raw material that's produced is not anywhere near enough for all 3 platforms of alternative proteins we're talking about. Same thing with production capacity. Nowhere near enough, even if you take the entire global capacity for fermentation and cultivated, right? So I think there are some of these bigger picture opportunities that a nation with all this capacity in terms of land and just expertise, right, can take the lead on. So really, I think there's tons of opportunity. As Bettina said, we just need to really pinpoint what the strategy is and put things in motion.
So Lavanya, that opens up sort of another area, and talking about successful models that have worked. And what do you think could be considered for Canada? And do you see pain points in some of these models that we're uniquely positioned to address?
Yeah, so I think one kind of starting point that many countries have taken is government-funded consortia, right? So last year we saw both in the US and Europe, and now also starting to happen in Australia, are these consortium setup, where essentially a lot of different academic labs are coming together. And if you think about Canada has a wealth of research happening in adjacent fields such as cell biology, tissue engineering, environmental science, food science, animal science, all of this. And I think there's a really nice momentum that can be created in Canada by funding a consortium that really brings kind of a network of academic researchers to come together and work on some major challenges, right? But when you think about challenges or roadblocks, I think there's still one major challenge remains, which hopefully Canada can address, is the fact that still research is happening in silos, right? So if you look at where the advanced research is happening, Allison, you mentioned Memphis Meats or Upside Foods, and there's many of these leading startups that are really taking things to the next level, but a lot of it is kind of locked up in patents, right? And therefore, we're still in very much silo mode. We're not really sharing, and therefore the industry is not progressing quite forward. So I think potentially two areas where Canada can maybe spearhead and again show how it can be done. One example is putting together maybe a national institute for innovation in manufacturing of cellular agriculture products. This is again sort of coming from an example in the US, which is this Nimble, which is a manufacturing platform for biopharma, which is essentially a private-public partnership that brings together all parties, right? So startups, government, but also pharmaceutical companies and suppliers. So essentially the entire value chain is represented. And what they care about is creating efficient, rapid manufacturing capabilities and training a world-class workforce, right? The competition is there, right? But they realize that the challenge is bigger than each one of them, right? So this Nimble has an organization over a decade old and has done great things for the biopharma and cell therapy industry. I have not seen this happen for cellular agriculture. And I think if Canada could, create a consortium, but also think about bringing these private and public entities together across the value chain, forget the competition, and let's go for solving this major challenge. That's my challenge number 2 for Canada now.
So it's a question of raising the tide for all boats, and that's where you get away from the competition, so increasing the size of the pie. But it's really an endorsement, I think, Lavanya, from you for the supercluster or the hub type concept for this particular area, which is great. So that actually builds into the future, and we're coming out of the pandemic now, and we're looking for ways for improve Canada's economic recovery. Bettina, this conference is called Building Forward Better. What do we need to do to make cellular ag opportunities front and center for that, so we can maximize the economic return?
Yeah, thank you, John. So I think we really need to build on the conversation we're having here today, but the recommendations that we're making in our report, which really states that we need to have that national vision, we need that investment, we need support startups, we need to develop the talent pipeline. All the things we have talked about. We need to engage in broad communication and outreach so that it is sort of integrates the consumer who benefits from the products at the end of the day. And I'm a big fan of these public-private partnerships. We talk about that in our report. Building the networks, building the partnerships, and sharing risk and sharing opportunity between the private sector and the public sector. I think that is so important because right now, a lot of the IP is sitting in the private sector. And therefore it's not shared. Lavanya just alluded to that. And we risk losing opportunity through that. We've seen this in the pharmaceutical industry, where I spend a lot of my time, is once you start sharing and you're opening up, because you're realizing you all come up to the market with the same product at approximately the same time. That just doesn't make a lot of sense. So sharing is important, because that gives us also the opportunity to think about the governance and the policy and all the other benefits that we're looking for here. And I'm looking at the last question of the poll, I think, where people sort of express that climate change mitigation is really a big benefit here. And if we want to build on that opportunity, I think there needs to be that sharing between public and private sector, so we can better think about how we actually action on that, because the opportunity on the climate side is huge. Just to give an example for cellular meats, and these are early estimates, but cellular meats would use 99% less land, it would use 96% less water, and 96% less GHG emissions. Those are early numbers, but just imagine if that is possible. There is a huge beneficial impact on using these new technologies. So, again, I think we're sort of at this stage. We need to figure out how we get started, who's taking the lead. And again, I think we can look at international models. The US has tremendous funding opportunities to create these consortia. Biomate is another great example of a sort of distributed biomanufacturing system that's just been funded. We need to look for that kind of support from our government to get us started.
So we are looking at a synergistic system with agriculture. I think Allison was talking about multi-trillion-dollar meat business alone, and I think there's some augmenting or not augmenting, supporting of both sectors that can happen there. So Giuliano, now that we've heard what the opportunity is, it leads into how can this be synergistic with our strong agriculture and agri-food sector, and to have this uniquely Canadian approach to building this area. And Juliana, I'm not sure if we've lost you or not. Go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes.
Yeah, thanks, John. I agree with many of the things that I've heard today, and I'm optimistic. That Canada, because of the design of our agriculture system and its history, I think there's room under the tent for everyone. I mean, clearly our motivations and our situation's a lot different from Singapore and Israel. They don't have a lot of land to sort of raise protein in the traditional sense as we do. And then we're an export nation as well. We depend on exports in our agricultural sector. It's a huge part of it. I think there are some lessons learned about sort of coexistence from my experience in the biotech side. Organic and conventional and GM, they're all sort of safe technologies on the crop side, and they've managed to find a way to exist. So I'm optimistic that there are opportunities with cellular eggs for conventional production as well as these novel production methods. As long as sort of everyone comes to the table and we engage in the right way, and we sort of are open and transparent in extolling both the virtues and the challenges that these new technologies can bring. You know, John, you've had your own experience with some technologies like the EnviroPig, where the value chain just didn't embrace that technology, and what was a good technology has sort of, you know, it's been literally put in the freezer. So there are some lessons that we can learn from with other technologies, but I remain optimistic that because of the opportunities, you know, there are some real benefits for Canada sort of pursuing cellular ag as another alternative protein source.
So in our poll, what are the top 2 benefits of cellular agriculture for Canada? Number 1 is climate change mitigation, 42%. But then there's kind of a tie for number 2, and that's meeting domestic market demand, consumer preferences, and resilience in the food supply chains, that type of thing. And also economic growth, startup and company creation, new products, and export opportunities. We are an export nation. And then coming in, I guess, 4th would be economic growth for startup companies and new products. So there is good potential here. Allison, what needs to happen in Canada for us to take advantage of market interests and the investment that's currently happening in Israel and the UK and in Australia and the United States?
So I think that Canada has an opportunity beyond many of these markets, and Juliana mentioned that. Our access to feedstock for fermentation, our access to a developed transportation infrastructure. I mean, we have problems in all these areas, but we also have great strength. And one thing I wanted to point out is that high growth SMEs are the principal engines of any economy, and SMEs with IP are 60% more likely to be high growth, and they are 4 times more likely to export. And so we're building this infrastructure. I feel a momentum in Canada where the accelerators and incubators are starting to really blossom across the country. And I think that what we really need to do is we need to see our governments move from an era of traditional infrastructure to an era of intangibles. We need to be investing in protecting our IP. We need to be updating our trade strategies related to what Giuliano's talked about, the regulatory environment. We need to foster digital adoption much, much faster. We are going to see replication and things occur because of digital adoption, machine learning, AI. We need to use our tax code and regulatory systems to stimulate innovation and investment. And I think Giuliano's point on, you know, is this going to be an area that we're going to be really seeing? I think cellular agriculture or cellular investment will be across every space. Cultivated food, fermentation-based ingredients, CPG products, human pet food, pharma, it's really across the space. And Lavanya quoted something from an A.T. Kearney study, and there really is a bigger market opportunity for lab-based protein than perhaps was argued for electronic vehicles or electric vehicles 10 years ago. This is a space that's coming. I think, to Giuliano's point as well, if we have constructive dialogue and understand what a huge market opportunity this is, I think we'll overcome some of the obstacles.
Excellent, excellent. So, Bettina, what do we need to do to ensure that we're not just bringing these things in and that we're actually making them here and exporting them, you know, creating that domestic market, but also creating that export market? What do we need to do?
I think we do what Allison and Lavanya just said, and with the regulatory system that Giuliano talks about. You know, I think we have a window of opportunity, and we need to get started. I think where my head is, you know, the beauty of cellular agriculture is it's a toolbox to do so many different things. I think we think a lot about, you know, the meat market. Of course, it's a huge market in the trillions, we talked about peas and so on and so forth, but there's a lot of other things. I'm working right now with a company that is using cells to make chocolate. That is chocolate is a huge market. It's one of the most consumed products around the world. Now, Canada is not known for making chocolate, but maybe we can go into these new areas that are attractive, because if we're developing a toolbox, we can, and we provide that infrastructure, we fund that infrastructure, we can apply it to so many different verticals. And then if there's a crisis and a pandemic, we can use some of that infrastructure to make the vaccines and drugs we need. So I think we need to bring the right players together right now, and just take advantage of that window of opportunity.
So I look at what you said in your opening remarks, Bettina. You talked about creativity. You talked about taste and nutrition and basically designer foods, right? Mm-hmm. So you're talking about less allergenicity, and then being able to create all sorts of different products from our own backyard, which is absolutely fantastic, right? Mm-hmm. Giuliano, I'm going to go back to the traditional ag sector for a moment. What can we learn? Like we did talk a little bit about the biotech side of things, but from a policy perspective and from a regulatory perspective, what can we learn to assist with the success of the cellular ag industry for Canada's benefit? Are there things that we can do with other countries, for example, to help move this sector forward?
Yeah, I think for sure, and like I said, we try to make those connections between our regulators and other regulators, and once those introductions are made, the dialogue seems to take off, and then more and more countries are included in those in those interactions, and it comes to other fora like the OECD, where it includes even more even more countries, and then the synergies start to happen, the analysis starts to happen, the standard setting starts to happen. So I think that process is already underway, and like the panelists have said, that sort of needs to accelerate. And as far as other learnings go, from my experience with biotechnology, perhaps the benefits of crop biotechnology, those accrued mostly to producers. So it's really the consumer benefits that will drive consumer acceptance, and although I'm encouraged by the poll, it suggests that people have an open mind. So that's great to hear, and we need to build on that sort of sentiment, that if see that there are potential benefits and they're delivered and in a transparent way, not oversold. Let's be realistic, like Bettina was saying. The early evidence seems to show the greenhouse gas profile of these production systems is favorable, but let's see some more data being produced so we can tell an evidence-based story, and that'll help with consumer acceptance and broader acceptance at home and abroad. Because like I said, I think there's lots of opportunities in Canada. It doesn't have to be whole food production in this space. Like has been said, it could be ingredients, it could be non-food, because we're constantly challenged in the agriculture sector in Canada to do more on the value-added side, and this to me is a perfect opportunity for that. We have, like the speakers have mentioned, we have lots of talent from a scientific and developing side. So yeah, let's take advantage of that. It could be a real positive value-added play for our sector.
So Allison, I'm going to ask something similar to you, because I know you've got a pretty significant traditional agricultural background as well. And how do we learn from what we knew for investing in traditional agriculture or other sectors, and make it relevant to what we're doing here in cellular agriculture? How do we get people to think that way?
I think Giuliano said a few things that really resonated with me. Number one, just like in traditional agriculture, if you're investing, you've got long biological time spans. I think cellular agriculture is very similar. We're going to see that development time is going to take a long time to get to the end goal. I also see that in cellular agriculture has to be careful of the comments that they make about environmental footprint, and every product that competes with a traditional product will have to have taste, consistency, and price as an underlying driving consideration. So it's going to take a lot of creative disruption to get to the point where we can compete with traditional agriculture, but it's possible. And if we do get to that point, the environmental footprint, perhaps the ethical concern, health-related concerns are going to be addressed. But we have to compete just like every other agricultural product. A cellular agricultural product will need to have the same, meet the same standards that every other product has to meet. So it's a high bar, but the prize at the end of it is well worth it.
So I think that's awesome, and I think what you've shown is a wisdom, because just because it's cellular agriculture, just because it's cool technology, just because it appears to do all these great things, it has to be competitive, right? Because you'll never have a product on the market for very long if it's not at a reasonable price. And I think when we were talking about the first burgers from cellular agriculture that came in, they were $300 a pound or something like that. And obviously you can't make it for that. But so the objective here will be to try and bring cost of production and that consistency in taste, consumer acceptance, all of those things need to be happening. And I'm also mindful of your comment about don't oversell it, right? So when we're talking about the environmental benefits of something like this, don't oversell it, because people will come in and say, well, what about the development of the media, and what was all involved with that? I mean, there's lots of different components of doing a life cycle analysis that we have to be careful of. So don't oversell it. So I know we're getting close to the end. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to go around the horn here and sort of ask for your takeaway message. And Giuliano, I'm going to start with you. What's your takeaway message from what you've heard today?
I guess I'm very sort of encouraged, that we're all seemingly on the same page about, what needs to be done to sort of advance this industry in Canada. As far as the government perspective goes, yeah, there's this sort of classical conundrum between do you sort of put policies in place that support all innovations, a strong IP system, robust regulatory system, or are you sort of picking winners? Like in the food space, there's been a bit of an evolution. I mean, the funding of the superclusters, including the Protein Industries Canada one, suggests that we're sort of, focusing on our strengths. And so it's conceivable that, more attention could and should be paid to cellular ag is sort of an evolution of that sort of protein investment. But, I guess, and what I've also heard is that, maybe the role of the government is to identify gaps, like the gaps in precision fermentation technology. We don't have a lot of capacity in this country, so maybe that's an area where the government should focus on making investments to sort of bring that up to speed.
Okay, and Lavanya, for you, maybe one sentence or two?
Yeah, I would summarize that. I think, again, I'm hopeful from the discussion. I think that it's clear that, conventional and future can coexist together. And I think if we go past the fact that we're, competing or cannibalizing our own industry, then the future is bright.
Thank you. Allison.
I'm just going to say it in a couple words. Creative disruption. We have potential. I'm investing. Let's get on board and let's compete to win.
Excellent. And Bettina. Oh, you're on mute, Bettina.
Sorry, I'm losing some seconds here. So first of all, I hope that this conversation gets on the radar of every Minister of Agriculture in the country, federally and provincially. And I do think that, with the right investments, the right incentives, the right partnerships, networks, we have an opportunity to diversify our food and ag sector. It's not to cannibalize, but to add to our strong ag position that we have. So let's.
All right, so I'd like to thank all of our speakers and our audience for being here. Allison, Giuliano, Lavanya, and Bettina, thank you for your excellent work, and we'll look forward to the next time. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, John.
Bye now.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, John.